This place is the ancient Ozark Mountains, home to a variety of wildlife and attracting gifted hunters who live off the land. Jason is a native son of these mountains, but had lived in the desert with his wife in recent years. They returned last winter, seeing some improvement in their lives. But a family tragedy struck, resetting everything. His father fell ill in the summer, underwent heart bypass surgery, but eventually passed away, leaving substantial medical and funeral expenses. Jason was forced to sell his family home, and since then, his family has been living. After 5 days of camping in a friend's yard, winter's arrival meant Morgan and his family urgently needed to find a permanent place. Jason decided to return to his old craft as a skilled knife maker proficient in various forging techniques. He set up a temporary forge to craft a rare knife blade for a new commission from a local who wanted a machete shaped like a python. He sketched the design on the furnace, donned his apron, and the forging frenzy began. The steel required repeated heating and hammering to slowly take the desired shape. After shaping, Jason polished the blade and heated it deeply for the quenching stage to harden the blade. Precise temperature control was crucial, and outdoors, Jason had to act swiftly and accurately to plunge the blade into oil, completing this within seconds. Thankfully, he succeeded. He wiped off the oil, but knowing too hard a blade can break easily, he reheated it slightly and then soaked it in oil again to achieve the perfect blade. While he was busy, his wife Mary, a professional leather worker, crafted a sheath from cowhide following the pattern of the blade. Jason's final step was attaching the handle. He clamped the blade between 2 wooden blocks and secured them with nails, but the wood cracked. So, he replaced it with rubber, which is waterproof and slip-resistant, making it an excellent material. He then tested the knife, satisfied with its sharpness. Back in the tent, Mary had finished the sheath. Jason, looking at the knife, was confident the client would be very pleased. Meanwhile, Morgan, having flown over the Alaska range, returned home with his last dollar spent on crucial supplies to survive the upcoming harsh winter. He had managed to buy a plane ticket at a very low cost because the flight was headed to a distant mining area and could drop him off along the way. After unloading all his supplies, the plane left. Waiting for Marg, he wondered where she was now. With only 5 hours of daylight in this region, they didn't have much time left. As time passed, Morgan felt increasingly cold and prepared to start a campfire. Suddenly, he heard the sound of bells. Marg arrived with the horses and their dog, whom he had missed dearly. The couple embraced. Morgan shared his adventures in town and handed Marg the oranges, delighting her as she hadn't tasted fruit in a long time. Together, they loaded all the supplies onto the horses. Then, riding horses, they began their return journey. With little daylight left, they quickened their pace. The horses, all Icelandic, maintained a good speed in the snow, covering 7 miles per hour. However, the most dangerous part of the journey was approaching, a small creek that had previously caused a horse to fall. Now, with additional weight, it was even harder for the horses to maintain their footing on the ice. The black horse, possibly traumatized, hesitated to move forward. Reluctantly, Morgan dismounted and led the bravest horse across first, hoping the others would follow. With Morgan's guidance, 2 horses successfully crossed, but Marg's black horse, under her urging, ran across and also made it to the other side. They continued on, facing greater challenges ahead. Due to a beaver dam, the creek had overflowed onto the bank, making the ground very muddy and treacherous for the horses. They proceeded carefully and managed to get through without incident. The rest of the journey went smoothly, and they arrived home as darkness fell. Marty, using a plane to set traps for capture, knew the pelts were valuable, potentially selling for up to $500 each. Unfortunately, after some time, he had nothing to show for his efforts and had wasted a lot of fuel. A cold snap had brought much lower temperatures, forcing him to stop flying. Now, 6 days later, with temperatures warming, Marty was ready to fly again. He was concerned that if any traps had caught prey, they might have been eaten by other predators due to his delayed retrieval. Marty set out to check his traps, each empty trap representing a financial loss. If he couldn't secure any pelts this season, he would face significant losses. 40 miles north, his first stop yielded nothing, and he kept the plane running as he hurried to the next location. Unfortunately, the second trap was also empty. His disappointment deepened. After spending so much time and effort, the lack of results was disheartening. By the end of the day, Marty had nothing to show for his efforts. With apprehension, he approached the next trap, only to find it empty as well. Frustrated, Marty cursed under his breath. A week had passed, and his plan had been devastatingly unsuccessful. Realizing the rarity of such a streak of bad luck, Marty knew he needed a new strategy to change his situation. He decided to return home. Unable to yield returns from this location, he decided to return home. The moment he saw his family, all his gloom vanished. For their happiness, he was determined to regain his strength. Tom had taught his apprentice 2 skills: setting traps for minks and extracting animals' brains for tanning hides. Now, he was about to teach Sean the 3rd skill: trapping beavers. The Kootenay River, a large local river, never froze even in the coldest weather. The 2 men, equipped with their gear, set out for a destination 50 miles away. It was Tom's first time in this area, but Sean, having grown up in the Bison River Valley, knew it well. They rode out in search of beaver signs, which typically gnaw on tree bark. Tom, observing through his binoculars while drifting downstream, found no fresh traces today, only an abandoned den. Beavers live in one area for a long time, moving only after depleting nearby food sources. Thus, this location was not worth setting traps. They continued downstream. For several miles, Tom saw no signs of beavers, which puzzled him. Disappointed, they finally spotted a fresh trail and some sticks with bark gnawed off in the river, clear signs of beaver activity. A beaver dam usually houses about a dozen beavers. Tom decided to set a leg-hold trap here. He had Sean open the trap since beavers enter the water from the bank. Placing the trap at the water entry point would likely catch a beaver. Tom then secured the trap to a metal post with a cable, attaching a heavy object to the other end of the cable. If a beaver stepped on the trap, it would be dragged deeper into the water as it struggled, and this setup would also prevent eagles from stealing the body. Tom had lost many beavers to eagles before. To lure the beavers, Tom dabbed a bit of secret sauce on the ground, made from beaver glands to mimic their scent. Continuing downstream, they soon spotted another beaver dining area. Tom planned to place a coney bear trap there, positioned between 2 sticks, which he would hammer into the ground. The trap would sink into the water with the sticks. Both types of traps were intended for catching beavers. Now, they just had to wait. After setting several beaver traps, a few days had passed. It was time to check them. Tom felt strongly that today would be a good day. However, his expression soon turned to a frown when he noticed that the water level had dropped significantly. Due to the upstream Libby Dam, the river flow decreased, making it difficult for the beaver traps to function effectively. A quarter of Tom's annual income depends on beaver pelts. Failing to catch beavers would be a severe blow to him. There was a trap by the riverbank, but they were concerned about the boat hitting rocks, so they disembarked in the middle of the river and dragged the boat to shore. They found the trap exposed in the air, having caught nothing. Under these circumstances, they could no longer set traps, so they had to retrieve them. Tom was in a foul mood, as this setback was unexpected. They continued downstream. This year, the price of fur was at a historical low, making each catch crucial. Soon, they reached the second trap and burst into laughter upon arriving. There lay a beaver in the trap. Sean exclaimed in admiration of his master's skill. Under an expert like Tom, such a beaver pelt could sell for up to $500. This beaver was their first pelt of the year, making it particularly significant. Seeing the excitement on Sean's face, Tom felt as if he were young again, filled with youthful exuberance. They moved on to the third trap, which also contained a beaver. Despite the river dropping 2 feet overnight, these 2 traps were well below the waterline, allowing them to function effectively. Today's catch was satisfying and proved many beavers still lived in this river, promising a bright future. Back home, Tom began processing the beaver. He started a fire in the stove and took out some knives to skin the beaver, explaining the process in detail. For instance, a beaver's tail could be used to make a knife sheath. If sold directly to fur traders, a beaver pelt might only bring in $15, but with Tom's craftsmanship, it could fetch $500, a testament to the value of skilled labor. As winter set in Alaska, Morgan and Marg had to prepare for the harsh weather. The first task was to clear ice and snow from the roof, as icicles posed a safety hazard. Morgan planned to remove them all, but working on a slippery, 15-foot-high roof was dangerous. Thus, he decided to build a rain shield. Once, while hunting, he had come across an old cabin with lightweight aluminum sheets, excellent for waterproofing. Now, he planned to retrieve them. The ruins were deep in the bushes, 5 miles north. After some time, he reached his destination, breathless from walking through deep snow, and struggled to locate the cabin, relying on his vague memory as he continued searching. Unfortunately, the scenery in front of him was all too familiar. He spotted a chopped tree stump, indicating the cabin was nearby. Gazing at the ruins, Morgan felt a deep sense of nostalgia. Perhaps a hunter once thrived here, but now only traces remained. He reminded himself to be cautious and steady, striving to establish a foothold in the wilderness. He needed to find the aluminum sheets. After digging for a while, he finally spotted them. He retrieved the sheets, knowing that metal is very valuable in Alaska. Tasting success, Morgan decided to explore the area further to see if anything else of value remained. He pried large iron nails from the wood, another scarce resource. He remembered a barrel was also here, and soon unearthed it. The iron barrel was heavy but very useful, so he decided to take it back. Dragging it through the heavy snow, Morgan started his return journey. He had walked a distance and only had an hour left before dark, with temperatures continually falling. He raced against time, but the uphill path proved challenging. Swearing under his breath, he let the barrel slide down the slope before continuing on. He finally arrived home after dark. Today, Marg had chopped plenty of firewood, and it was time for them to enjoy dinner. Having accumulated some wealth through forging knives, Jason, with the arrival of the first winter snow and the bone-chilling cold filling the air, took his family to find a new piece of land to settle on. Due to his limited finances, there weren't many options. There was a piece of land by a creek, 15 acres in size and within his budget, but it was very remote with no roads leading to it. They could only reach it by boat, making it an interesting family trip. They arrived at the creek, and Jason threw a stone to check. It had frozen over, thwarting their plans. Jason needed to devise a new strategy. They started a fire to keep warm while they examined the map. Eventually, they decided to split up. Jason would walk 14 miles to scout the area, while his wife Mary stayed to set up a temporary camp. Jason took his bow and arrows, hoping to hunt some food along the way. With his wife's blessing, he began his journey. So far, he had seen over a dozen properties, none of which satisfied him. Now, he pinned his hopes on this one. If it felt right, he aimed to move in before the harsh winter set in. When he finally reached the location, he pulled out his map for confirmation. 2 fence posts were the landmarks. Jason began to survey the terrain and noticed a fish in the water. There was dinner. He took out his bow, tied a rope to the arrow's tail, and moved carefully forward. Then, decisively, he shot the arrow. He struck the fish directly in the vital spot and pulled it out of the water using the rope. The fish was plump, and Jason cheerfully carried it to shore. He took out a small knife, and seeing the fish still struggling, he swiftly ended its life with a single cut. Then, he gutted the fish, removing its innards. A fish of this size could yield up to 10 pounds of protein. He tied the fish with a rope and slung it over his shoulder, continuing to explore the new land. Soon, he found the boundary, which marked the property's location. It looked promising, but Jason quickly identified a problem. The terrain could form whirlpools. Part of the island remained underwater for much of the year, making it unsuitable for purchase. Jason returned to the camp. Although the property was disappointing, the delicious fish for dinner made the trip worthwhile. Despite being pierced by an arrow, The fish still thrashed about until a knife suddenly plunged into its skull, killing it instantly. Mary decided to showcase her cooking skills. She cut the fish into pieces and placed them in a frying pan. After waiting a while, the fish was cooked. They were ready to feast. Since the creekside property did not meet their requirements, they returned to a friend's land. After 3 months of searching, they still had not found a suitable property. Seeing her husband's dejected expression, Mary felt sorry for him. She knew he was striving hard to provide a comfortable environment for his family. Not wanting to burden her husband further, a new problem arose. Their meat supply was dwindling. Their location was surrounded by wild boars, which would not take too much of Jason's time. Jason entered the forest, looking for signs of wild boar activity. He soon found mud on a large tree, a mark from a boar rubbing its skin. Touching the mud, he realized it was still wet, indicating the boar had just left. He followed the trail and discovered more signs of boar feeding. Jason decided to set up a trap here. He and Mary brought some equipment and placed an iron frame between 2 trees. They improvised a pig trap using discarded materials, similar to a gate. The boar could enter from the outside, but could not open it from the inside. They then used metal stakes and wire mesh to form a fence. However, the key to the design was a pulley system to activate the gate. Jason used a rope and a piece of wood as the trigger. The rope was connected to the gate, and the wood was inserted into the ground. When a boar touched the rope, it would trigger the trap, and the gate would swiftly close, making it nearly impossible for the boar to escape. Jason then scattered some corn to attract the boars. As bait, they poured corn inside the trap, especially around the trigger. Confidently, the two returned home. The family sat down together for dinner, with only 2 days' worth of protein left in the storage. Now, all their hopes were on the trap. Suddenly, Jason stood up. It seemed there was some noise in the distance. He went to check and found the trap had been triggered, but the wild boar had torn through the wire mesh and escaped. This was truly disappointing. These black substances are charcoal. 2 men crushed it into powder, which has unexpected uses. They transferred the charcoal powder to a barrel, then took out a can of purple powder. Following a specific ratio, they created the base for making explosives. Eustace added some water and mixed it into a paste, then left it to dry in the sun. The reason they made explosives was to destroy a huge rock blocking the road that they used to transport wood from the mountain. The road was impassable for trucks. After drying the powder for 2 hours, they prepared to test its effectiveness. Eustace poured some on a board and ignited a small piece of wood. Preston brought it close to the powder, and with a loud bang, the powder exploded, sending up a cloud of smoke. It seemed they had successfully made explosives. Now ready to demolish the rock, they took their tools to the site. The best method to break the rock was along its natural lines. Eustace cleaned the cracks and carved out a hole at least 6 inches deep. The rock was very hard, and it took significant effort to drill a hole of the right size. They then poured black powder into the hole and sealed it with mud, leaving a fuse exposed. Everything was ready. Eustace lit the fuse, and they quickly retreated. The fuse burned rapidly, and seconds later, the explosives detonated, sending up plumes of smoke. Once the smoke cleared, they approached and found that the rock had only slightly cracked. The power of the explosives was insufficient. They needed to go deeper and place more powder. They drilled 3 more holes in the rock, stuffed the remaining black powder into them, sealed them with mud, and connected them with a long fuse. Ready for a final attempt, they loosened up their limbs. Eustace lit the fuse. Then they sprinted away at a 100-meter pace, taking cover behind large trees and blocking their ears. Soon, a massive explosion echoed through the wilderness, sending stones flying and causing a spectacular scene. Trees near the explosion were split open. Pleased with their handiwork, the two admired their simple yet satisfying job. The extreme cold turned Alaska's rugged landscape into a dangerous challenge. Morgan collected several aluminum sheets from the abandoned cabin. Today, he planned to use these materials to build a rain shelter. He drew the desired shape on a piece of wood and followed that plan for construction. Meanwhile, Marg had set up a small trapline around the homestead, mainly for catching rabbits and minks, and she was ready to check it. Each busied themselves with their tasks. Morgan's first step in construction was to mill wood for the frame. He had a logging machine to assemble them. Then he started the chainsaw and began cutting the wood to get smooth boards. After preparing several boards, he cut a notch in the wall of the shed to extend the frame. Just then, Marg returned, holding a ptarmigan. Morgan exclaimed in surprise, asking where the ptarmigan came from. It turned out Marg stumbled upon it while checking the rabbit traps and decided to bring it home. They would have delicious ptarmigan meat for dinner. Marge tore the ptarmigan apart by hand and threw the innards to the puppies, letting them also enjoy a treat. Each puppy got a share, and seeing them devour it made Morgan hungry too. He sped up his work. Marge came over to help. Together, they fitted the boards into the notch. Morgan secured them with nails, then drilled several screw holes in the wood. He connected several wooden bars diagonally to the boards as the base of the frame. A triangular shape is the most stable structure, so Morgan used this design to create a sturdy frame. The next step was to add the aluminum sheets. He used an electric drill to secure the aluminum to the frame, making it waterproof. Marg passed him the materials while Morgan sat on the structure, continuing to lay the sheets. These aluminum sheets were once used for newspapers in the 1980s. Marg read aloud from them, finding the news from that era very interesting. They completed the roofing amid laughter and chatter, satisfied with their work. Now, they no longer had to worry about icicle issues and could return to enjoy their dinner. A fuse was burning rapidly, and two men ran frantically. Accompanied by a roaring sound, their homemade explosives destroyed a huge rock, clearing the path. Now the road was open, and the men needed to transport wood from the mountain. When crossing a small stream, Eustace heard a tearing sound. He stopped the cart and inspected it, finding a crack in one of the wheels. The cart was quite old, so the wood was somewhat rotted. They had no choice but to return the same way and try to repair the wheel. The two men started to prepare. They took out their tools one by one and attempted to remove the wheel. The history of the cart could be traced back to Roman times. Roman chariots were designed with butterfly-shaped wheels for speed. 2,000 years later, wheel designs have evolved to better suit long journeys and rugged mountain terrain. This has made the wheels more robust but harder to repair. The two men removed the outer iron rim to replace the rotted wooden wheel inside. They measured and marked the new wheel, then drilled holes at each point before installing it. Eustace needed to measure the diameter, using a tool called the traveler, which equates one full rotation to 20 inches. After measuring the wooden wheel, he compared it to the iron rim and found the rim was 1/8 of an inch smaller than the wheel. They decided to modify it by heating the rim in a furnace. High temperatures alter the molecular structure, making the iron more elastic. Eustace began hammering to elongate its circumference, but ended up extending it too much. They had to heat it again to slightly shrink it back. Using a device called a shrinker, they placed the deformed iron rim between two clamps and hammered continuously. The shrinker tightens the twists in the metal and holds the folds together. After measuring the diameter again, Eustace found it to be just right. The next step was to install it on the wooden wheel. The iron rim needed to be heated to a certain temperature to be malleable. They then fitted the rim onto the wheel, and once aligned, they quickly cooled the iron with water, causing it to contract back to its original position. The wheel was complete, and they reattached it to the cart with excellent results. On the other side, a hunter, Marty, and his daughter Noah were observing from the riverbank. They spotted a moose but decided not to hunt it as it was not yet mature. Every hunter strictly adheres to nature's laws and does not kill young animals. After observing for a while and having little success on the trapline, Marty returned home to set traps near the house where a river nearby housed some minks. The area had deep snow, so Marty dug a snow den by the bank and placed a piece of meaty bone at the entrance as bait, completing the trap. On his way back, Marty unexpectedly saw wolf tracks. Wolves rarely come near homes unless tracking prey like the moose. Wolves work together to hunt large animals. Marty counted the tracks and estimated at least 5 wolves in the pack. Sensing an opportunity for valuable fur, his mind became active with possibilities. Back home, Marty decided to process a mink first, as the value of mink fur had significantly decreased this year. The mink fur he collected was worth less than $100, meaning he was operating at a loss. However, if he could catch a few wolves, there was hope to offset some of the losses. Marty set off in his plane, looking for a kill site. Where there's a kill, there would be wolves. With only 8 weeks left in winter, Marty had to seize every opportunity to make his annual income. After some searching, Marty spotted a kill site on the river ice and landed there. From the bones, he determined it was a reindeer, nearly completely consumed. Once wolves strip a carcass to the bones, they move on. But the remains attract scavengers like minks and wolves, both targets for Marty. He chose a tree on the bank, built a pathway with some branches, and used fish heads as bait. Then, he set a large animal trap at the entrance. The trap for catching wolves was ready. Next, he set traps for minks. Although mink fur was low in value this year, if Marty wanted to break even, he needed to earn every penny. He continued flying, searching for signs of the wolves. Soon, he discovered another kill site. A poor moose had fallen victim to the wolves, which had devoured its carcass. The nearby snow was littered with chaotic footprints. Marty imagined the scene: a moose moving through the brush, wolves clinging to it, the moose struggling fiercely. But the wolves, with clear rolls, harassed it continuously until they brought the large animal down and feasted. The 2 kill sites Marty discovered were only 10 miles apart, indicating a mature wolf pack. Over the past 5 years, the number of wolves in Alaska had steadily increased. However, balance is key to maintaining ecological stability. Moreover, a wolf pelt is worth $500, enough to reduce his debt accumulated this season. The moose wasn't entirely consumed, and the wolves would return to finish it. So Marty set several traps nearby, creating a net to catch the cunning wolves. To catch wolves, one must think like them. Wolves rest nearby after a feast. And indeed, he found a wolf den in the woods, with some blood traces nearby, possibly from an injured wolf. He tied a wire on the animal trail. The wire's front end was a noose that would tighten quickly when it ensnared a wolf's neck. Using the same method, he set up 5 traps in total. Wolves typically returned to their prey within a week, so all Marty had to do now was go home and wait. Marty refueled his plane, adding to his debt. Now, all his hopes were on the traps. He approached the first trap with a nervous heart. It was a wolf trap, but unfortunately, it was empty. But the nearby mink trap was effective. This year, mink fur could only be sold for $7, but it was better than nothing. Marty reset the trap and then moved on to the next location, where he had high hopes. There, he found fresh wolf tracks, but the first trap had not caught anything. Marty was not discouraged, as there were still several traps to check. One of the traps had captured an adult gray wolf, which was still holding a piece of moose meat in its mouth. The adult gray wolf, weighing up to 70 kilograms, was a challenging catch. Marty struggled to transport it to his plane, but it could bring in $500. With a positive mood, Marty headed home. A snowstorm swept through Alaska. Marty wanted to strike while the iron was hot, but the bad weather was a setback, especially with only 6 weeks left in the season. He needed to make the most of every day. He knew there were several beaver ponds nearby and planned to try his luck there. Beavers like to eat the tender shoots of poplar trees. On the way, Marty collected some, perfect for setting traps. In the fall, beavers collect large piles of branches and store them in the water as food reserves. When winter arrives, they select branches daily to take home and eat. Marty quickly broke through the unexpectedly thin ice layer, a sign that pleased him as it indicated he was in the right spot. He discarded the ice chunks and set a conibear trap, fixing it to a wooden pole beneath the trigger. When a beaver tries to eat the branches, its head would hit the trigger, setting off the trap. Marty slowly lowered the pole into the water and then placed another stick horizontally at the hole's entrance, securing them with wire to prevent the pole from being pulled into the water. Marty then dug a second hole nearby to set another trap.